Stop for a moment and look carefully at your life. Look at the stress you carry, the frustration you hide, the silent anger you pretend not to feel. Most people think power is something you gain by adding more. More confidence. More discipline. More money. More influence. But Machiavelli understood a darker truth long before modern psychology ever existed. Power is not gained by addition first. It is gained by elimination. Because before a man becomes powerful, he is contaminated. Contaminated by weak habits, emotional dependencies, invisible fears, and the desperate need to be accepted by people who secretly benefit from his weakness. Most men never realize this. They spend their entire lives trying to build strength on top of corruption. Trying to become disciplined while feeding distractions. Trying to become respected while begging for approval. Trying to become dangerous while remaining emotionally available to everyone around them. And that is why they fail. The truth is simple. A man cannot become powerful until he quietly removes the things that make him weak. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Because real transformation is silent. Loud people are usually still trying to convince themselves. But the dangerous man? He moves in silence while his entire life changes underneath everyone's feet. Machiavelli knew this. He understood that weakness rarely looks weak in the beginning. Sometimes weakness looks like kindness. Sometimes it looks like loyalty. Sometimes it looks like entertainment, comfort, or love. But if something consistently steals your focus, controls your emotions, or delays your growth, then it is not harmless. It is a chain. And most men are covered in chains while calling themselves free. That is why today, we are going to uncover the 10 things you must quietly eliminate if you truly want power. Not fake motivational confidence. Not social media masculinity. Real power. The kind that changes how people look at you without you saying a word. The kind that makes your presence heavy. Calm. Untouchable. But understand this before we begin. This video is not for weak minds. Because once you see these truths, you will never be able to unsee them. You will begin recognizing how much of your personality was built to survive approval instead of reality. You will start seeing how your emotions have been manipulated by people, systems, and distractions designed to keep you passive. And the moment that awareness begins, your old self starts dying. So ask yourself honestly. Are you ready for that? If you are, then listen carefully. Because the first thing you must eliminate is one of the most dangerous addictions in modern society. Number 1, the need to be liked. Most men are not living. They are performing. Every conversation, every opinion, every social interaction is carefully filtered through one hidden question. Will people still approve of me if I say this? And that single question destroys more potential than failure ever could. Because the man who fears disapproval becomes predictable. He avoids conflict. He suppresses honesty. He waters down his thoughts. He smiles when he should walk away. He apologizes when he did nothing wrong. Eventually, he becomes so addicted to acceptance that he no longer knows who he actually is beneath the performance. This is why Machiavelli warned that attempting to please everyone is fatal. The more desperately you seek approval, the more controllable you become. People can sense it. They feel your fear underneath your politeness. And once people sense that fear, they stop respecting you. Respect does not come from obedience. It comes from emotional independence. Look carefully at the most powerful people you have ever met. Whether you like them or not, they all shared one trait. They were willing to disappoint people. Calmly. Without emotional collapse. Without needing universal validation afterward. That is power. Weak men think power comes from domination. Strong men understand it comes from self-control. Especially the control to remain emotionally stable when others misunderstand you, criticize you, or walk away. Most people will never reach this level because approval feels safe. It gives temporary comfort. But the price is your identity. Every time you betray your instincts to maintain acceptance, you lose another piece of yourself. And eventually you wake up one day realizing your entire personality was designed for survival, not truth. The dangerous man stops negotiating with his own mind. He says what he believes. He walks away when necessary. He allows people to dislike him without collapsing emotionally. Not because he is cruel, but because he understands something most people never will. If your peace depends on everyone liking you, then you are emotionally owned by the crowd. And crowds are always weak. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I no longer trade truth for approval. Number 2, over-explaining yourself. This habit destroys power faster than people realize. Weak men explain everything. Every decision. Every boundary. Every absence. Every change. They feel an unconscious need to justify themselves because deep down they fear being misunderstood. But powerful people understand a brutal truth. Explanations reduce authority. The more you explain yourself emotionally, the more you invite negotiation. The more you defend your choices, the more others feel entitled to question them. Eventually, your entire life becomes a courtroom where everyone believes they deserve access to your reasoning. And that is dangerous. Machiavelli understood that mystery creates psychological weight. People respect what they cannot fully read. They become cautious around individuals who speak carefully and reveal selectively. But modern society trains men to expose everything. Every emotion. Every thought. Every insecurity. Constant confession disguised as authenticity. And then they wonder why nobody respects them. There is a difference between honesty and emotional leakage. The powerful man does not lie unnecessarily. But he understands that not everyone deserves access to his internal world. Some people are not listening to understand you. They are listening to measure your weaknesses. Pay attention to what happens when you stop over-explaining. At first, people become uncomfortable. They push harder. They ask more questions. Why? Because silence removes their control. They can no longer emotionally manipulate you through guilt, pressure, or validation. And that silence unsettles them. Most men cannot tolerate silence because silence feels vulnerable. They rush to fill it. They explain too much. They reveal too much. They seek reassurance through words. But power often lives in restraint. The man who speaks less appears more dangerous because people project depth onto silence. They assume there is something hidden underneath it. And most of the time, they are correct. This does not mean becoming cold or antisocial. It means becoming disciplined with access. Not everyone deserves complete transparency. Not everyone deserves emotional intimacy. Not everyone deserves explanations for your evolution. Sometimes the strongest answer is simply action. No debate. No defense. No emotional speech. Just movement. Machiavelli once observed that men judge more through appearances than reality. And appearances are shaped by emotional control. The man who remains composed under pressure immediately gains psychological advantage over the man who constantly reacts. Remember this carefully. Over-explaining is usually not communication. It is anxiety seeking permission. And the moment you stop needing permission, your presence changes completely. People feel it immediately. They may not understand it consciously, but they feel the shift. Because calm restraint carries more authority than emotional persuasion ever will. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence is no longer weakness. Number 3, emotional impulsiveness. Most men destroy their future in moments instead of years. One emotional reaction. One uncontrolled outburst. One impulsive decision made in anger, jealousy, loneliness, or pride. And suddenly everything changes. Relationships collapse. Opportunities disappear. Respect evaporates. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because they lacked emotional discipline. This is one of the greatest differences between weak men and powerful men. Weak men react. Powerful men calculate. Machiavelli understood that emotions are dangerous servants. Especially when they control your timing. A man ruled by emotion becomes readable. Predictable. Easy to provoke. And once someone can predict your reactions, they can control your behavior without touching you. Look around carefully. Society constantly rewards impulsiveness disguised as authenticity. People celebrate saying whatever you feel, following your emotions, and letting it all out. But uncontrolled emotion is not freedom. It is exposure. The man who cannot control himself eventually becomes controlled by others. Because emotional people are easy to manipulate. Anger blinds them. Lust distracts them. Validation seduces them. Fear weakens them. Their decisions stop being strategic and start becoming chemical. Temporary feelings begin shaping permanent consequences. And the world quietly punishes that weakness. The dangerous man feels emotion deeply, but he does not obey it blindly. He pauses. Observes. Thinks. He understands that emotions contain information, but they should never dominate command. Most men speak when angry and regret it later. Powerful men remain silent until they understand the board completely. Most men chase revenge emotionally. Powerful men choose timing strategically. Most men collapse when insulted because their ego controls them. Powerful men observe insults like data. They study who delivered them, why they delivered them, and whether responding benefits them at all. That level of restraint terrifies people. Because emotional control creates unpredictability. Nobody knows how to manipulate a man who does not react impulsively. Nobody knows how to control someone who refuses emotional bait. And that is where real power begins. Not in domination. In composure. Think about it carefully. The calmest person in the room usually controls the room. While everyone else reacts emotionally, the composed individual gathers information. He notices weakness. He studies patterns. He waits. And by the time others calm down, he already understands the situation better than everyone involved. This is why silence often intimidates emotional people. Silence forces them to confront uncertainty. They cannot read your intentions. They cannot measure your emotions. And humans fear what they cannot predict. But emotional impulsiveness destroys that advantage instantly. The moment you react uncontrollably, people see your triggers. They see your insecurities. They learn exactly where to attack next time. You hand them the blueprint to your mind. And most men do this daily without realizing it. They expose themselves through anger, desperation, oversharing, jealousy, and emotional dependency. Then they wonder why they feel powerless in relationships, business, and life. Machiavelli understood something modern men forget. The person who controls himself controls the outcome. So before you try to control the world, control your reactions. Learn to sit with discomfort without exploding. Learn to experience anger without speaking immediately. Learn to feel rejection without collapsing into insecurity. Because emotional mastery is not suppression. It is command. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I master my reactions before they master me. Number 4, the addiction to comfort. Comfort is the silent killer of potential. Not because comfort feels bad. But because it feels good enough. And good enough has destroyed more lives than failure ever will. Most men never become powerful because they are too comfortable to transform. They want strength without sacrifice. Discipline without pain. Respect without pressure. They fantasize about becoming dangerous while remaining protected from discomfort. But power is built in environments most people avoid. Isolation. Rejection. Discipline. Pressure. Sacrifice. Uncertainty. Machiavelli knew that hard times reveal the true nature of men. Comfort hides weakness. It allows laziness to grow quietly beneath pleasure. It creates soft minds addicted to stimulation and convenience. Eventually, comfort becomes a prison disguised as peace. Look at modern society carefully. Men distract themselves constantly. Endless entertainment. Endless scrolling. Endless consumption. Their minds are overloaded with dopamine but starving for meaning. They avoid silence because silence forces self-awareness. They avoid discipline because discipline exposes how weak their habits actually are. And over time, this addiction destroys ambition completely. Because comfort lowers standards slowly. First you delay difficult tasks. Then you avoid difficult conversations. Then you stop taking risks entirely. Eventually, your entire life becomes structured around emotional convenience instead of growth. And you call it stability. But it is decay. The dangerous man understands something most people refuse to accept. Growth requires friction. A sword is sharpened through resistance, not softness. Muscles grow through stress, not comfort. Character develops through hardship, not convenience. Every powerful trait admired in strong men was built through suffering most people tried to escape. Discipline is painful. Isolation is painful. Self-confrontation is painful. But weakness is worse. Weakness forces you to depend on luck, approval, and external circumstances because you never developed internal strength. And dependent men are never free. That is why powerful individuals intentionally expose themselves to discomfort. They train discipline when nobody is watching. They choose difficult paths voluntarily because they understand something terrifying. If you do not choose your struggles consciously, life will choose them for you eventually. And life is far less merciful. Most men wait for crisis before changing. They wait until heartbreak, humiliation, failure, or betrayal forces growth upon them. But the intelligent man transforms before destruction becomes necessary. He eliminates comfort strategically. Not all comfort. Just the kind that weakens him. Because there is healthy peace, and there is seductive stagnation. One restores your strength. The other slowly erases it. Pay attention to your habits carefully. Anything that constantly distracts you from your purpose is not harmless entertainment anymore. It is anesthesia. It numbs your awareness while your potential quietly dies underneath convenience. This is why discipline feels powerful. Not because it is glamorous. Because it restores self-respect. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your mind changes. Every time you resist distraction, your focus sharpens. Every time you choose long-term growth over short-term pleasure, your identity evolves. And eventually something dangerous happens. You stop needing motivation. Because disciplined men are not controlled by feelings anymore. They move regardless of mood. Regardless of comfort. Regardless of emotional resistance. That level of self-command separates powerful men from average men permanently. Most people will never reach it because comfort keeps seducing them backward. But the few who break free become nearly impossible to stop. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose discipline over comfort. Number 5, attachment to the past. Most men are not destroyed by the present. They are haunted by what they refuse to release. Old betrayals. Old failures. Old identities. Old regrets. They carry these memories like chains while wondering why they feel emotionally exhausted all the time. But Machiavelli understood something brutal about survival. A man who cannot detach from the past becomes weak in the present. Because attachment clouds judgment. It distorts perception. It traps your energy inside events that no longer exist. And the longer you stay emotionally connected to what already died, the less power you have to build what comes next. Look carefully at people who remain stuck in life. Most are psychologically living somewhere else. They replay old conversations in their minds. They fantasize about revenge. They obsess over people who left. They mourn identities they outgrew years ago. And while they remain emotionally frozen, life keeps moving without them. Power requires detachment. Not emotional numbness. Strategic detachment. The dangerous man learns how to let things die without dying with them. Relationships end. Seasons change. Loyalty disappears. People betray you. Expectations collapse. But emotionally intelligent men adapt instead of emotionally drowning. Weak men become prisoners of memory. Powerful men become students of it. That distinction changes everything. Because memory should provide wisdom, not permanent suffering. The past should sharpen your instincts, not control your identity. Every painful experience contains information. Every betrayal teaches pattern recognition. Every failure reveals weakness. But once the lesson is learned, the pain becomes unnecessary. Most people never reach that point because suffering becomes familiar. They build personalities around wounds. They introduce themselves through trauma. Their pain becomes their identity. And eventually they stop growing because healing would force them to abandon the only version of themselves they understand. But Machiavelli respected adaptation above emotion. He understood that survival belongs to those who evolve faster than circumstances change. And evolution requires sacrifice. Sometimes the old version of you must disappear completely. That includes old habits. Old relationships. Old beliefs. Old emotional attachments. And sometimes even old dreams. Because not every dream deserves loyalty forever. Some ambitions belong to younger, weaker versions of yourself. Some goals were built from insecurity, approval-seeking, or fantasy instead of truth. Powerful men reevaluate themselves constantly. They are willing to abandon identities that no longer serve their future. That level of detachment terrifies most people because identity feels safe. Familiar suffering feels safer than uncertain growth. But staying psychologically attached to the past creates stagnation. You cannot become powerful while emotionally living in ruins. The dangerous man grieves privately, learns quickly, and moves forward completely. He does not beg life to reverse itself. He does not waste years wishing reality behaved differently. He adapts. And adaptation is power. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I release what no longer serves me. Number 6, the fear of solitude. Most people are terrified of being alone. Not physically alone. Mentally alone. Because silence forces confrontation. When distractions disappear and conversations stop, a man finally meets himself without performance. His insecurities become louder. His fears become visible. His emptiness becomes impossible to ignore. That is why modern society keeps people constantly stimulated. Noise protects people from self-awareness. But Machiavelli understood something dangerous. A man who cannot tolerate solitude can never become truly powerful. Because dependence creates vulnerability. The moment your peace depends on constant validation, companionship, attention, or stimulation, your emotional state becomes controlled by external forces. And externally controlled people are easily manipulated. Weak men fear isolation because they mistake loneliness for emptiness. Powerful men use solitude as refinement. They think deeply there. They sharpen strategy there. They rebuild themselves there. Most transformations happen privately long before they become visible publicly. Look at the strongest individuals throughout history. Nearly all experienced periods of isolation. Not because they hated people, but because growth often requires separation from noise. Distance creates clarity. Solitude reveals truth. You begin noticing how many opinions shaped your identity. How many desires were implanted by society. How many relationships drained your energy instead of strengthening it. And once you see that clearly, your standards change permanently. This is why weak people constantly seek distraction. Silence exposes unresolved emotions. It exposes dependency. It exposes confusion. So they run toward entertainment, social media, shallow relationships, endless conversation, anything to avoid sitting quietly with themselves. But avoidance creates fragility. The dangerous man sits alone without needing escape. He can spend hours thinking without panic. He does not require constant stimulation because his mind is not afraid of itself anymore. That level of internal stability creates enormous psychological strength. Because once a man becomes comfortable alone, manipulation loses power over him. He no longer tolerates disrespect just to avoid loneliness. He no longer begs for attention from emotionally inconsistent people. He no longer sacrifices his standards to maintain company. And suddenly his entire presence changes. Calm. Selective. Difficult to control. People can feel when someone no longer fears losing them. That emotional independence creates natural authority because attachment desperation disappears. Machiavelli understood this clearly. Dependence weakens negotiation. The person who needs less always holds more power. And most men need too much. Too much reassurance. Too much attention. Too much emotional comfort. That dependency leaks into their decisions, relationships, and ambitions. Eventually they become controlled by the fear of abandonment instead of guided by purpose. But solitude cures this slowly. Not instantly. At first solitude feels uncomfortable because your mind begins detoxing from distraction. But eventually something shifts. You stop fearing your own thoughts. You stop craving constant noise. You begin enjoying your own company. And that is when true confidence begins. Not performative confidence. Internal confidence. The kind that exists quietly even when nobody is watching. Because real power is not loud. It is stable. Now understand this carefully before we end. Power is not about becoming cruel. It is not about manipulating everyone around you. It is not about pretending emotions do not exist. Real power is self-mastery. The ability to remove what weakens you without needing applause for it. Most men wait for permission to transform. They announce their goals publicly. They seek validation for discipline before discipline even exists. But the dangerous man moves differently. Silently. He eliminates distractions quietly. He builds discipline privately. He controls emotions carefully. And by the time the world notices his transformation, it is already complete. That is why Machiavelli's philosophy still unsettles people centuries later. Because it forces uncomfortable honesty. It exposes how weakness often disguises itself as morality, comfort, and emotional dependence. But once you see these patterns clearly, you can never fully return to unconscious living again. Now the question becomes simple. What must you eliminate before power becomes possible? Because the answer to that question may determine the entire direction of your life. If this message reached you deeply, write this in the comments. I eliminate weakness in silence. And remember this. The most dangerous transformations are never announced. They are revealed.